Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thanks everybody for joining us. Oh wow, I think this is our third show on In Touch News. Music. This is our show.
Man, I got stuck at Union Square, hoping that I would catch you there. Much to my dismay and no avail, I had to set sail. When I'm trying to get
There we go.
my love way across town, from place to place, gotta be in this party space. Can't wait to see her face.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. Oh wow, I cannot believe this is our third show on In Touch News.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, guys, we cannot be more happy with the response that we've received from you. The Soul Purpose Show is doing great. We have we have like thousands of viewers.
Yes, we do.
Which is really, really exciting. Not only do we want you to tune in and view the show, but we also want to hear from you as well. We created this medium because we wanted to bring topics of interest to our community, but to the broader community as well. And this is a little unorthodox for us, obviously, given the times that we're in. But we're just going to go with it. So we're going to take these topics, turn them into how to survive this pandemic until it's over. Prayerfully, it's going to be over very soon. But again, we just can't thank you enough for tuning in with us. Before I forget, please follow us, if you will, on our social pages, because we have our own Facebook page at Soul Purpose Show, and our Instagram page at Soul Purpose Show as well. Also want to shout out, send some healing vibes to our producer. I understand he was trying to be a little weekend warrior and had a little accident. So he is on the mend, but he is back at work. We appreciate you, and we wish you a speedy recovery. So, Monica, what are we talking about today?
So the last few weeks, we've been kind of talking about the coronavirus and the pandemic. And as you know, we've been quarantined for almost probably 2 months, yeah. 2 months for sure. And so on social media, I've seen a lot of discussion about how people are feeling. And I know we did a little promo video that my husband directed, wrote, and produced.
If you haven't seen the promo video, you need to go to our page and check it out.
Kind of making light of kind of how a lot of us are feeling. I mean, I didn't really lock him outside, but there have been times that I've wanted to lock you outside and lock the dog up,
and vice versa,
just to create a sense of peace. And so people eating up the quarantine snacks, gaining 500 pounds. So there's just a lot of stress and anxiety in this space. And so in addition, I think this week there was a physician, an ER physician, the head of the ER department at New York Presbyterian Hospital. So, and she committed suicide. And so I know, in addition to people eating up the snacks, which people kind of joked about, there are also, I've seen a lot of Facebook posts and IG posts about people feeling sad and lonely. And we're supposed to be self-quarantining and we're supposed to be social distancing, but to the extent that you are by yourself in your house, it could feel kind of like social isolation. And so I know one of my stores gave birth to a child during this space and period. So I know that you'd wanted to talk about mental health for a long time. And so I just thought it'd be a really good idea to try to have that conversation in this medium, because people are, whether you're struggling just because you're sad and there's a lot of anxiety and stress, trying to balance work and teaching and just kind of all the different things that are involved in this space, or you've already had some mental health challenges. I thought this would be a really good opportunity for us to have a conversation about a really important topic.
So I think our thought here is that we're going to wrap for the month of May, which happens to be Mental Health Awareness Month. We thought it would be right to kick off our show today, or kick off the month, with a show focusing specifically on mental health. And we're not done, because over the course of the next few Saturdays, we're going to give you tips on how you can help heal your mind and your body and your spirit. And those themes will also come to you with special guests. So we're super excited that today is going to be the first time we have a special guest joining us.
Yay! So we actually have two guests. Dr. Marquita Wills is going to join us the first half, and Deetra Martin is going to join us the second half. And so I'm super excited. In addition to them being fabulous women, they are also women of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I did. But I'm super excited about, we kind of did like a little discussion yesterday, and it was just a really phenomenal discussion with them yesterday. So I'm super excited about having them on the show today to kind of share their thoughts and their perspective on kind of what's going on right now.
Outstanding. So I'm not sure if you can see her, because we can actually see her from our side, but she also has audio. And as soon as she unmutes herself, I want to ask Dr. Wills, how are you?
Well, I am blessed. Let me start there and say I want to really thank the two of you all for sharing your platform that you've created for such an important topic. As you noted, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and so grateful to you for inviting me onto the show. So I'm doing well. I'm blessed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Outstanding. Well, guys, Dr. Wills is she's a bad chick.
Yeah, she's.
I mean, when y'all go to her well, go to our Soul Purpose Facebook page. We actually have her bio, and she has an extremely impressive bio. She's Ivy League educated, and she is an author.
She is an author.
And wait a minute, do we have the book?
We have a book. We have the book.
You have the book. You have the book. Thank you. Thank you.
The book is called Understanding Mental Illness by Dr. Marquita Wills and
Dr. Carlin Barnes.
Who's also a soror.
Yeah. See, look at these women of Alpha Kappa Alpha, just so many people. So, but I have to tell you, Dr. Wills, that that it is an easy read, right? So typically when you get into these spaces, at least for me, you may be concerned. I'm a lawyer, so I can the legal field, I can read a book about the law in my sleep. But when it's something that is dealing with medicine or medical issues, some people can kind of probably get a little nervous about reading it. And I have to tell you, it is a really easy and good read. We're still working our way through, but it's so informative. It's so informative.
I'm so thankful that you said that, because that was our intent. That's where we started. We said we want to make a book that's easily digestible, easily accessible, so that you could pick it up and get it. Right? It wasn't medicalese. It was speaking to the masses, because our goal really is to improve the emotional health and wellness of the nation. Right. And so we wanted to be able to provide a resource so that people could learn. There's so much stigma and everything around mental health. And so we wanted to get some good factual information out there. And that's why we wrote the book.
Awesome.
That's a great segue for us too, because we grew up in a generation where if you were acting strange, we would either jokingly or have our parents just call us, we're acting crazy, right? So there's a lot of to your point, stigma around how we act and how we think, and when we do certain types of behaviors that make us crazy. But you are a professional in the field of mental illness. Why don't you kind of start with just sharing with our audience from a definition standpoint, what's the difference between like mental illness and when somebody's just kind of not doing so hot or acting out, if you will?
Yeah, no, great question. And we do kind of try to break that down in our book as well. Mental illness is really kind of when there is a disorder in terms of your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, and your behaviors. So, we all are human beings, and we all have thoughts, emotions, feelings, and behaviors that lie on a continuum. However, when things get, for lack of a better term, out of whack, to the point where it's interfering with how you function, how you relate at work, how you relate with others, how you participate in school or not participate in school, if there then becomes a disruption in your ability to function, that's when we start saying, okay, this might be a disorder. Okay. I get a lot, hey, I'm sad. Does that mean I'm clinically depressed? Or I'm anxious. Does that mean I have an anxiety disorder? And the answer to that is no. We all have those feelings. We all have emotions. And I honestly think that's why it's so hard for people to really wrap their head around a disorder. Because if you don't have a disorder, you say to yourself, well, I got sad and I got over it. So why can't you get over it? Or I get anxious sometimes and I'm able to kind of get myself together. So why can't you get over it, right? So those are some of the questions. And this is what I like to say to that sort of response. If someone has asthma, and if someone doesn't have asthma, and they stand in a pollen field, one might sneeze, right? But the one with asthma is going to go into anaphylactic shock and may die, right? So it's really that underlying biology that determines how we're going to act to the same circumstances that present themselves to us in our lives. And so that's when you sort of say, hey, someone's got a disorder, but other people do have the internal tools, skills, and resources to be able to be a little bit more resilient. So those are some of the differences.
So Dr. Wills, I do have a question. Typically when people think about mental illness, they think about depression and bipolar disorder and anxiety, because you mentioned anxiety. Are those the only three, when you're talking about mental illness and mental health, are those the only three things that you in your role are looking at, or does mental illness, is it more broad than those three things?
Great question. Excellent question. It's broader than that. Okay. It's broader than that. So I'm thinking, when I think of mental illness, I'm thinking of, in children, autism, obsessive compulsive disorder. I'm thinking of schizophrenia in adults. I'm thinking of substance abuse disorder. I'm thinking of eating disorders.
Okay.
I'm thinking, so we've got anxiety, depression, and then there's a whole sort of plethora of other mental health issues that can impact folks.
Okay. Okay.
And we go through many of those definitions in our book.
Okay. And so how many people, and we read the book, so I know what the stats are, but if you could share with our listeners and our viewers, how many people statistically suffer from some form of mental illness in the United States?
So we say, so first of all, taking just one quick step back, the way we diagnose mental illnesses is through what we call the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual. It's sort of, for lack of a better word, the Bible in mental health, and it helps you define what the disorders are. When we look at the DSM-5 and think about different disorders, and the book is this thick, it's a big, thick purple book that's published by the American Psychiatric Association. When we think about that book, we think that 1 in 5 adults, American adults, in any given year is suffering from some sort of diagnosable mental condition that is impacting their functioning. And that's the key, right? So if you're sad and you can push through, I wouldn't quite call that depression, clinical depression. I'd say you're having a normal mood swing and fluctuation. But if you're sad and you've lost 12 pounds and you can't get out of the bed and you are having thoughts of wanting to harm yourself and you can't concentrate on your work, then that's when I start saying, okay, we're looking at clinical depression and I need to think about how to get you the tools, treatment, and resources that you need.
Now, you mentioned lost 12 pounds. Now, in my case, if I gain 12 pounds, do I call you?
Or gain 12 pounds, or gain 12 pounds. Excellent question, Mr. Harris. Or gain. You can have fluctuations in your sleep that are up or down. Yeah. You can have fluctuations in your appetite that are up or down. Some people can't eat. Some people overeat, depending on the situation. So absolutely. Thanks for that call out.
So I do want to encourage, we have a lot of people on our Facebook Live, and so I would encourage those who are there, if you do have questions, to go ahead and post them in the chat room, and to the extent that we're able to, we'll try to kind of get Dr. Wills to address some issues. Did you have a follow-up?
Well, no, and I was just going to say is we're going to gather all of these questions as well. We do kind of an after show called Food for the Soul. And that's where we, just kind of in a less structured environment, start to field some of the questions and also provide some resources for you. So we have links and stuff for people to be able to access information as well. So So don't panic. We want to hear from you, and we want to get your questions answered, especially on this subject, because it is and it hits home with families a lot as well.
And so I know there is a stigma specifically in the Black community, but I think just on a broader level, there is a stigma associated with mental health and mental illness, and I would love to get your view on why that is, in particular, and we'll get into like more specifically kind of how, if you are suffering from mental illness or some mental health issues, how you're probably impacted, or the triggers that are prevalent now because of this situation that we're in. But I would first like to kind of get your view on why there is such a stigma in the broader community, and then more specifically within our community.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question, and I've thought a lot about this. I personally think one of the reasons why there is a stigma is because there are no blood tests, right? So there's no objective criteria. I can't, take an EKG and say, yep, you've got depression. I can't take a blood test and say, yep, you've got depression. I can't take an X-ray and say, yep, you've got anxiety disorder. So because there's not that hard physical evidence, and that's what we're used to when we think about science and medicine, we tend to kind of discount and display that. So if I can see a pneumonia in my chest X-ray, that's real, but if I can just see things and, it's subjective and there's an element of subjectivity to it, I think that causes people. So in some ways, the science of psychiatry and mental health issues is evolving and growing. And I think that there are lots of researchers who are looking at biochemistry and DNA and also imaging, functional imaging, to be able to kind of prove, yes, we know that these structures in the brain are impaired when someone has schizophrenia, for example, or bipolar, right? So I think that's one thing, that the science is younger, if you will, than it is in other disciplines in medicine. And I think it's also what we hit on before, is that because it lasts on a continuum, people sort of kind of think, I got over it, so why can't you? And they just don't have that empathy and compassion. And that's one of the reasons why we're really out here trying to have this conversation. The other thing is, I think that there's stigma for all kinds of reasons too. So, HIV has stigma, TB at one point had stigma, cancer one time had stigma. So these are things that are evolving. And I would argue that in the last 20 years, we've come a long way as a society to advancing and getting that word out and destigmatizing. I have a couple of patients that I'm seeing now who are international, and they knew over in their countries of origin that they had some things that they needed to deal with that weren't being addressed. Okay. But when they moved to the United States, where it actually is a little bit more talked about, and it is part of the national conversation more and more and more, they were like, I want to get some help. People are talking about this. I want to access that help. And so they did. And so while I do agree that there's absolutely positively more stigma, that's why we wrote the book. That's why I'm here talking right now. That's why I'm a champion for this issue and topic. I do think I'm seeing some changes in our society, both in American society as well as in our culture, in African-American culture as well. So I do want to just put that hope out there too.
Okay.
You touched on something I'd like to explore a little bit, and that is biochemistry. One of the things that might be attributing to some of the stigma as well is, those of you who are psychiatrists, and we understand the difference between psychiatry and psychology and psychological counseling is psychiatrists actually prescribe, drugs, mood altering drugs. And so most of us, even the term mood altering drugs, kind of takes me back to, during, when I was growing up, it was like, there was the hallucinogens from the kind of the 60s and 70s hippies movement to now we're saying mood altering, like now you're taking drugs. I don't want to send my loved one to someone like you just for you to pump them up with drugs. and turn them into something different. So that, do you feel like that adds kind of to the difficulty and
I like that perspective. I really do. I think so. I think, you know, people there's a stigma against the treatment, right? And so, you know, you've got movements against the treatment. The Scientology movement really sort of, you know, kind of says that that the field of psychiatry in and of itself is, you know, questionable. And so, yeah, I think the treatments in and of themselves, people are like, I don't know if I want my loved one to get medication. And I get that. I get that in my one-on-one conversations with my patients. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, oftentimes, you know, we'll work hand in hand with therapists to think about how to use some of the psychosocial interventions first, because they do work. And then if we've got sort of a severe or extreme situation, then we'll think about adding medications on.
So you mentioned religion and Scientology, and we actually have a question from one of our viewers. Can you talk about mental illness and spirituality, religion in the Black community, and how can we encourage us to have our beliefs, religious beliefs, but also seek the help of experts? So pray, but get therapy is kind of, I like to say. But yeah, so if you could address that. I think it's a phenomenal question. Address that one.
I love that question. And just know that, you know, I oftentimes partner with churches, particularly churches in the African American community, to have really good conversations about mental, emotional health and spirituality. So that's someplace where I feel very comfortable having this conversation. I personally think they go hand in hand. You know, emotional health, and I love the framework that you guys have for your May programming, mind, body, spirit. It's all one. You know, I just happen to have a focus on mental health, but when I talk about interventions that are important for coming together, it's all one. It's all intertwined. That mind, body, spirit connection is so important. And so I am, again, enlightened and empowered by a lot of the churches who are noticing that there's a lot of suicide going on among clergy. Yeah. And who are saying, hey, we need to step up and take a look at what this is all about, and are inviting mental health professionals into those conversations for both the clergy themselves as well as their congregation, and really unifying all of those concepts together in a way that lifts us all up. Right. Because at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. And so I don't see it as separate, you know, although, you know, May is Mental Health Month and that's important. And there are more and more times where pastors are inviting mental health experts in to have just what you guys are facilitating right now, good dialogues about, hey, am I okay? Would I benefit from therapy? You know, I'm a praying woman. I'm a praying woman, and I also take preventive steps to make sure that my mental health are okay. And sometimes one of the tools that God brings to you is a therapist or a psychiatrist who can take you to the next level. So use the tools and resources and gifts that God endows in others to be able to move us all forward.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the subject of the Black clergy, because part of why this conversation has been on my mind for so long, and we're not finished with it, by the way. We're going to talk about mental health in our community, especially much more, is some of the disparities between how it's perceived from a male and a female perspective. We know most of our Black clergy, most of our pastors and leaders of the church happen to be men. And if you happen to go to an African American church, then you're talking about a Black man who was probably raised in this, you know, culture of men are supposed to be strong, and we're supposed to be this, and we're supposed to be that. And when we have a problem, we don't cry about it. We, you know, just kind of suck it up and get over it. Talk a little bit before we go to our break about some of the differences and the disparities between the perceptions from how women are treating themselves and how men are seeking treatment as well?
Yeah, really interesting question. Really interesting question. So, what we do know is for depression and anxiety, women present probably about twice as much for treatment than men do, and that's across all socio demographic classes. So, women are more help seeking. We know that. Men, on the other hand, rather than, we don't see them clinically necessarily as being what we would say is depressed. Oftentimes what you'll see is sort of an agitated depression. And so men express it with anger and acting out and those sorts of things. Withdrawal is another thing that you'll see in men. But you're not going to see sadness, crying, tears, that sort of thing. There's a different sort of sociocultural overlay over top of that. So you've got to be discerning when thinking about the mental health of folks, depending on their gender, will present a little bit differently one way or another. So that's one thing that is well known and documented in the literature. Yeah.
So I guess because we're taking a break in about 4 minutes, but I did want to kind of bring this a full circle with respect specifically to this crisis that we're in. And we've been on lockdown for 2 months. And there are people who may not necessarily suffer from any type of mental illness or mental health issues, but you're still sad, you're still stressed, you're still anxious, and that manifests itself in various ways. So whether that's eating, overeating, doing the whole grazing thing, whether it's being snappy and very irritable.
Like you've been to me.
Okay. Listen, we've been locked in the house for 2 months with each other. So, but I'd like for you, just in terms of are there things that we should be looking at in ourselves and or family members or friends looking at with respect to our loved ones, that may be, if there's concerns about people's mental health? Are there, my question may not be being articulated the best, but essentially, are there triggers that we should either be looking at for ourselves and or in our family members in this space in particular, if we are concerned about folks' well-being? Because there's a lot of single people who are living by themselves who have not been hugged, and you're a hugging person who haven't been hugged or haven't had any social interaction for 2 months. So can you, touch on that, about what we should be looking for?
For sure. So, first and foremost, just want to say this is an incredibly stressful period for everyone in our country. And I might even go so far to say for everyone on the planet. Yeah. This is unprecedented. And so this is truly a stressful moment for everyone. So allowing oneself to recognize that, sit with that, and be okay with some of the feelings that might surprise you to come out. I mean, I want to be a little bit normative about some of that too, that we're all experiencing it. And so we're all going to be reacting to that in very different ways. So it might be irritability, it might be sadness, it might be loneliness, it might be anxiety, it might be overeating, it might be a lot of things. And so recognize that, be conscious of that, and then take action. Now, I think, Monica, what you were asking me is, when should I be worried?
Correct.
When should you be worried? I think you should. So first of all, right now, we got to proactively reach out to everybody. It's everybody's job right now to stay as socially connected as we can while we're physically distanced. So your people who aren't able to, who are living alone, check on them a lot, send them links, posts, love, everything, whatever. Check on them a lot. For your older folks who are feeling isolated and haven't been out in 6 weeks, check on them a lot, right? But when you need to get worried is if people start saying things about wanting to harm themselves. And dig. That's one of the things that we say a lot in our book. Do not be afraid to ask someone about whether or not they're wishing they would live or die.
Yeah.
Because people are like, well, if I say that, does that mean that they're going to end up being that way and then it's on my hands? Hey, if they say that, then what we do is we send them to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and I'm going to have that as a resource later on during the after show to talk about that. So, if people start thinking about wanting to harm themselves, that's a problem. If people start saying they can't, function and they're not eating and they're not getting one, that's a problem. So there's some critical sort of linchpins that we can talk about in the after show about when you do need to say, I'm going to intervene, I'm taking action because you're my loved one and I care.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Well, Dr. Wills, we cannot thank you enough. You mentioned the book again. Understanding Mental Illness, Dr. Marquita Wills, Dr.
Truly my privilege. Thank you.
Barnes. This has been great. We've learned a lot. We've learned a ton. I just want to give our listening audience a heads up. Coming up next, we have a licensed family counselor.
Yeah.
Her practice deals with relationships and deals with families, and she is going to get into some really, really cool stuff to tell us how we can continue to keep our families together during this pandemic as well. Dr. Wills, thanks
so
again.
much.
We appreciate you. Take care. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
We are gonna do what makes us feel right.
By now, we're all aware of the dangers of COVID-19. Like others with existing health issues, cancer patients are at a high risk due to their compromised condition. If you are newly diagnosed with cancer, your care likely can't wait. Moffitt Cancer Center is the best place for your cancer concerns and to provide guidance to help you plan your next steps. We're here for you. Call 1-888-456-2839 or go to moffitt.org/here-for-you.
Been in a car crash? Call Ricky. Don't know what to do? Ask Ricky. We will connect you with a lawyer and doctor experienced in auto accident injuries. Call Ricky at 844-361-7425. After an auto accident, you have 14 days to seek medical attention. You may be in pain, so call Ricky. Ask Ricky for your best options. 844-361-7425. Call Ricky. Ask Ricky is a legal and medical referral service. The lawyers in our network pay to receive referrals.
Jazz at Miss Connie's House is brought to you by Ray Williams Funeral Home, providing the highest quality, professional, and caring service for your family. Call Jeffrey Rhodes at 813-253-3419. That's 813-253-3419. Or visit him at 301 North Howard Avenue, Tampa, Florida. Ray Williams Funeral Home for the finest care and quality service.
Wherever we go, we about to bring on the positive vibe.
Hello. Thanks for coming back with us. We had an outstanding first half.
We did. Phenomenal.
We talked to Dr. Marquita Wills, and she is a licensed psychiatrist and therapist and author.
Yep.
She's written an outstanding book. We're going to have that information available for you, how you can actually acquire that book as well during our after show, which we call Food for Soul. But now this half hour, I've been looking forward to because what our guest, Deetra Martin, has her own practice on family counseling and couples counseling. And she has agreed to tell my lovely wife everything she's been doing wrong for the last couple of months in terms of the way she's treated her husband because she's stressed out. But we're super excited to have Deetra Martin on. Deetra, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Oh,
we can.
Outstanding.
We can.
Good
Wonderful.
to see you. Good to see you. Tell us a little bit first before we get started about your practice and about what you do specifically.
Absolutely. I am a marriage and family therapist. Okay. So that is my specific modality. While I do individual counseling, I specialize on the family system. So because I love couples speak so much and I just love the intertwining of the couples and the dynamics, that's why I chose to go into that, because I just like to know what's going on. That's just just to be honest.
And what's the name of your practice, Dee?
Protect Your Peace Therapeutic Services. Self-explanatory, because I feel like we all need to protect our peace at all times.
Good. Yeah. Amen. Amen.
That's fantastic. Now, Monica, would you like, since she wants to know what's going on, would you like to explain to Deetra why you've been the way you have?
I have absolutely no idea what he's talking about. I have no idea what he's talking about, Deetra. But I did want to, we talked, I'm not sure if you tuned in to the first half to talking to Dr. Wills. But we talked very clinically about kind of what mental health, what mental illness is, what mental health issues are. And she really dug a little deep, which was
amazing.
Amazing conversation. But what I wanted to ask you was, in this space that we're in, where we are social distancing, some folks may feel socially isolated. In your practice and your experience, what are kind of the top 3 things that people are advising that they're struggling with in this time?
Absolutely. Right now, the things that I have seen the most, definitely anxiety, depression, and there has been an increase of catastrophic thinking and rumination. Now, what I mean by that with catastrophic thinking, this is what we call a cognitive distortion, and we all have them. Okay. Cognitive distortions, I like to describe, are flaws in our thinking, errors in our pattern of thinking. So when we have the cognitive distortions, we like to break them down and restore them with positive reframing. So because of this crisis, there has been an increase of the catastrophic thinking, understandably so. So what happens is the reality of our predicament right now, it's dire, right? But the catastrophic thinking causes and contributes to more anxiety and more depression and more negative thoughts. And because we're in limbo right now, it's hard to pull yourself out of it. So what I've been discussing with clients is ways to, number one, reframe thinking. You know, you can still have gratitude while in this particular situation. So we try to focus on the things that you still have. Number one, your health.
Yeah.
You know, number one, you know, you're still able to communicate with family, even though you're not touching them physically. Some of them still are able to see their faces. I know with my family, we have a weekly little Zoom, you know, family session. So there's ways to get around it, but just try to focus on the things that you do have and the positivity.
That's really cool.
So I was reading yesterday, because I told you last night that I was preparing for a depo. So yes. I did some research. There's actually a 2019 article, Columbia University Department of Psychology, and because I'm going to get into, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. I do want to be specific about our community, and I recognizing that mental health issues and mental illness affects all people, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, religion.
And we appreciate all of our white listeners and our Asian listeners, Latino listeners, because they cover the spectrum, and we have heard from you.
Right.
We hear you.
But we are Black. So, I mean, just on the real, we're Black. So we're Black. And what I do know, and we talked about this a little bit last night, is that we don't, when I say we in the Black community, we don't necessarily seek out assistance when we feel like we are struggling, whether that's because we feel that we can't afford it, or whether it's because we feel it as a weakness, or whatever the situation is, we don't tend to reach out. But at any rate, there's a Columbia University article, and it's said that the adult Black community is 20% more likely to experience mental health problems such as major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. And these sobering statistics suggest that despite efforts to reduce disparities among race and class in the U.S., inequalities are increasing, and we experience a higher rate of mental health problems, but a lower rate of mental health services. So I know the statistics don't, so when you think of mental health issues and mental illness, we aren't necessarily the face, right? And so we're not the face. So the question that I have is us not being the face a product of just because we're not seeking counseling or seeking help, or is it we're underrepresented, we're undertested, we're misdiagnosed? So kind of because a lot of us are struggling and a lot of us are suffering, but we are not necessarily the face of this space.
Mm-hmm.
What is a contributing factor in your opinion for that?
So I think it's everything that you just said, but based upon my experience and my observation, our community shares the same mental health issues as the rest of the population, right? With even greater stressors due to racism, prejudice, and economic disparities. So our age group, us, Keith, Monica, we're like, as we described yesterday, first generation that is more accepting of psychotherapy. My parents never went to therapy. That was not their ministry,
Right.
but, back then therapists, you went to therapy because you were deemed touched.
Right.
Or as Keith said before, crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the directive of you don't put your business in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we've been trained years ago to repress, suppress, and keep it moving. So that meant that vulnerability was viewed as weakness. Vulnerability was viewed as not being strong because we've been in survival mode for generations. We don't talk about our feelings, we survive.
Right.
So that's that piece, that stigma that we have amongst our community. But then there's, like you said, the lack of representation. A lot of clients seek me out because I'm Black. They will put that filter in the search and say, I want a Black therapist. And that is because, culturally speaking, a lot of our community feel like they cannot connect with a white therapist. And quite frankly, they don't trust them, some of them, as far as clinicians. And there's deep-seated trust issues there. And quite frankly, for a Black male therapist, that's like seeing a unicorn. You do not see a lot of Black male therapists. So when you do find that representation, you hold on to it, you grab onto it because you feel comfortable, like, wow, this is not so bad. I feel like they get it, and I feel more inclined to discuss my feelings.
So let me ask this question. How do you, so you mentioned that there's a lack of trust. We don't want to put our business in the street. We're the first generation to really actively seek out counseling. And I know in the first half, Keith talked about Black men and the hesitance on the Black male's part to reach out to seek assistance. How, in your opinion, how do we turn that corner? How do we encourage more in our community to seek when you feel like you're struggling, or when family members see a family member struggling? How do we encourage them, or how do we turn that corner so that we are getting the help that we need? Because we're killing each other, we're killing ourselves as well. You have little children, like five-year-olds, because of bullying, committing suicide, and we're not really talking about that. So how do we turn that corner?
We turn the corner by having these types of conversations.
Okay.
Because when you know better, you do better. So we have to continue to have these courageous conversations, to have this dialogue, to make it acceptable to seek psychotherapy and not attach a problem or something negative, with it. We need to be more inclined to discuss our feelings. I want to go back to what you said about the women and the men. That's the level of emotional intelligence. I want to piggyback on what Sarah Makita said, is that emotional intelligence, there's different parts of it, but women are more inclined to have higher, compatibility with emotional intelligence because there's self-awareness, they're managing our emotions a little bit better, empathy and social skill. And men, have that social construct and that expectation of we protect and provide. And then y'all can talk about the emotions. So it's about making our men feel comfortable being okay expressing themselves and not have the stigma attached to being vulnerable, and let men understand that you don't have to have that tough exterior. There's no pressure on you to be hard or whatever you want to define it as. And then for women, I put on my my Instagram post the other day, is we also have to ditch the cape. We do not have to, hold the burdens of everything and everybody all the time. It is killing us.
Yeah.
Okay? We have to start taking care of ourselves first. And that's how we turn this thing around.
Now, as a part of taking care of yourselves, especially as a mom, as a working mom with
Some
children, of our children are just bad, right? So during this period of time, You are around these kids all day long, and then you get pressure from people saying you got to homeschool the kids, and you got to, you just have to understand that, they're around you. But if you got bad kids, you got bad kids. I mean, there's a coping mechanism, to do like what you used to do to us, just kind of, get that switch, sit them outside for a switch. I mean, how do you cope with these bad kids?
So I'm going to talk to you about my personal experience right now. It's been rough. It's been rough. As a therapist, I'm here to tell you, it's been rough. We are all doing the best that we can with this new normal and this new reality, right? Patience, 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 patience. And then sometimes you got to walk away. Sometimes one of you has to tell your partner, I'm having a moment. I like to tell Morris all the time, babe, I've reached my limit. My cup has runneth over. I have to step outside for a second because I may go to the dark side with children. Yeah. So sometimes you have to be honest with yourself and say, oh, I need a moment. And this situation calls for a lot of moments. Mm-hmm. So again, go easy on yourselves. You're doing the best that you can with the level of circumstance that we're under right now. We're all doing the best we can and show ourselves some grace.
That's great advice.
So I do have a question, and I know I'm surprised that he has not brought this up because he touched on it yesterday when we were talking. I know you mentioned at the very beginning about the way that this situation is impacting individuals as a whole. But how is this? My husband touched on children. How is this social distancing and being locked in and quarantined affecting relationships? Number one. And then two, if you're single, you have some folks that have been in the house for 6 weeks who, I think the human as a person, as a human, you crave, generally speaking, human touch and human interaction. And so you have some single people too who have not been hugged or touched. And I think I mentioned it yesterday. I was talking to my sister, went by her house maybe 2 weeks ago to drop something off, and went inside her house, had my mask on, and was not able to hug her, right? And so I got back in my car and just, being transparent, and cried because I know that my sister is, she loves physical touch. She is the best hugger. And the fact that I wasn't able to hug her really, really bothered me to a place where I was super, super sad. I mean, I cried and I moved on because I recognized the space that we're in. But I felt bad, and I'm not a hugger. I mean, you can, but I don't necessarily need to hug, but I know that she is. And so there are some people out there who are huggers and who like physical touch. And so I know it's two questions in one, but the relationships, and then how, if you're single, how you navigate this space.
So Monica, I'm going to first validate your experience and tell you that your response was appropriate, okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is that I have had an increase in couple session since this has started. It has increased tenfold just because people are just trying to deal. I've seen this situation impact in positive ways where the family members are, grateful that you're spending more time with each other. And then I've also seen families have more awareness about little things that are getting on their nerves. Because as of right now, there is a magnifying glass, right? You have nothing left but to focus on each other. There's not a lot of distraction going on. So those things that may have irritated you before that you really didn't notice are now magnified and exacerbated because now you have nothing left to look at. So why does he chew like that? Or why are you talking to me? Like everything is just really amplified right now. So again, you have to understand that this is temporary. You have to, if you're seeing that the irritability is increasing, this is now a time to, work on your effective communication and ask yourselves, is what I'm about to say productive? These are the times you can put all of those things into practice. And again, you're going to get on each other's nerves. I would be concerned if you weren't, because that's just not realistic. I would feel like you were fronting. So just understand that this frustration is due to circumstance and it doesn't define your relationship. Okay.
Me locking you out the house was not a definition of how I feel about you. I just need to.
That's something else we have to talk about.
And I like the record to reflect, I did not really lock him out the house.
Okay, but listen, we've been focusing on the kind of the female perspective quite a bit, and we have female guests. But now that we have these medical professionals, I can tell you what the guys are thinking right now. All of us.
Get to it.
In your practice of the things that are magnified, are you also seeing a magnification of the level of intimacy between the husband and the wife? And if the wife isn't feeling magnified, can we send them to you to help them during this crisis?
To fix the libido.
To fix it. Okay.
So
because their libido, generally speaking, would be every day, 2 and 3 times
especially
a day,
during a pandemic,
and that's not realistic.
Especially during a crisis.
So I'm going to touch on the intimacy, and then Monica, I'm going to go back to your social distance because I didn't forget.
Okay.
So yes, Keith, intimacy has been a big topic of discussion. We're finding that the sexual act is being affected by this because there's anxiety within this particular situation. When you have anxiety, and sometimes it can lead to panic and despair, this does affect libido. So you have to understand there's aspects of anxiety that actually help your libido. Certain levels of, the right amount of anxiety, tension, and uncertainty can really bring out a little zest and can activate libido. But if you have too much anxiety, too much tension, and too much uncertainty, that can overwhelm your libido and decrease it. So think of it like Goldilocks, like the principle, not too much anxiety, not too little anxiety, and just the right amount of anxiety can create a good moment for you. But you also have to be patient with your partner, because just because you're feeling a little zesty doesn't mean that that person is. So you kind of have to be patient. And with women, speaking as a woman, that patience and that understanding can increase libido because you feel like, wow, you get it. You get me. So, let's see how we can, help us both in these moments.
That's
so, just patience can really help.
Patience.
And tone of voice.
Let me write that.
All about delivery.
I'm writing it down. Patience.
All about that delivery. All about that delivery. And then Monica, back to y'all are funny. I cannot. I really can't. Back to the social distancing piece. Understand that there's a difference between isolation and being lonely. Social isolation is the physical separation from people. And then living alone, while there is loneliness, sometimes a distressed feeling of being alone or separated, that is what can contribute to anxiety and depression. So what you want to do is when you're feeling that way, even though you can't physically touch the individual, it's important that you do continue to reach out. I know you missed that touch, but still having some type of communication can really help in that arena. And just understand the cues. Like Sarah said before, when you are reaching a certain level of depression and loneliness and you feel like you want to harm yourself or try to, take away the pain by doing something really drastic, that is when we have a problem. But understand and remind yourselves that this is temporary and that you will see your loved ones soon and you will get to hug them and embrace them sooner than later. Okay?
So before we close out, because we have a little bit of time left, just some coping. You kind of touched on some, but if you could provide just some coping strategies or techniques for folks that are going through this, as we're going through this space and time and season, if there's some coping techniques or mechanisms, if you could suggest those to our audience.
Absolutely. The first thing that I would suggest is surrender to a lack of control. Okay. Because all of this is beyond our control. So acceptance and surrender is going to help you reframe your thinking and lower your stress levels. Okay. Limit the news. Limit the news. I know it's hard. I'm one of those people that is also obsessed with the news, but I had to step away because I realized that it was getting obsessive and it can become unhealthy. So at some point you have to take a moment to just step back and detach from that. Commit to your thinking every day. And what I mean by that is commit to positive thoughts and feelings and actions that are connected to health and well-being. This is going to be a daily choice that you have to make every single day to practice peace. Choice to practice peace or practice stress. So that's a commitment that you have to make. And y'all, relish the downtime. I know this isn't a normal, but after this is all over, we're going to wish that we were back to these days where we were just chilling in the house and able to just get up and just be. So, to the best of your ability, relish the downtime. And the last thing I would say is compassion. Compassion for yourselves is essential and towards others. I know that this pandemic if it has not directly affected you, you're very lucky. If the only thing that you're worrying about right now is quarantine, bless your heart. But there are other people who have lost people. We all know people that have succumbed to this. Yeah. So be compassionate to others. You may not have their same walk, but be compassionate to them. Understand that they're going through things. So be compassionate to yourselves and compassionate to other people.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. And I guess as we close out, there was one thing that you just kind of touched on is kind of being, being grateful for what it is that you have. And not only have some of us actually lost people, but there's millions of Americans right now who are out of work.
Yes.
And have been, put out of work because they're in an industry where they just can't, be in proximity with other people. They just can't get the work is just not there. So talk a little bit about, in your practice, how that lack of ability to kind of be gainfully employed has affected the family relationships and the family dynamic.
It's affected it greatly because, again, it's that anxiety of the fear of the unknown. You go from having stability to not. So again, that's why it's so essential right now that everyone expresses their frustration and understand that you're going to have days where you're not okay. And guess what? That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Understanding that this moment, while it is a painful moment and a moment of uncertainty, understanding that, again, everything, or have a hope that things are going to work out the way they're going to work out, but understanding that you're going to have to take it day by day. And when I was working in a treatment center, we used to call it future tripping. Future tripping can be detrimental to health. So again, to the best of your ability, do what you can today, and understand that you can only do what you can in this moment. And just take it moment by moment, second by second if you have to. And like I told Monica, progress, not perfection.
Yeah, listen.
Okay?
That I've used it. I have embedded it in my memory. Progress, not perfection.
Right.
And I'm glad I like that term, future tripping, because, and we even touched on this a little bit during our last segment, is look, we who are believers, we know who holds the future.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, we are going to come out of this. The question is how are we going to come out? Are we going to come out whole? Are we going to come out damaged? Are we going to come out with a fresh perspective on things? The simple reality is that this is a season, and this is, we've got to, acknowledge that you can't lose your family and your family relationships, kind of during this season, understanding that it is only going to be here for a time, and we will come out of it. This has been phenomenal.
I have been super blessed by this entire, I could not, I said I wanted to have this conversation just flow organically. Mm-hmm. And this was a blessing for me personally. I think both of us, and I'm praying that people who have listened have been enlightened, empowered, and just can move forward from here. And to your point, just leaving this space and this season more whole, better, and at peace.
So tell us how we can access you. Tell us the name of your practice again for our listening audience.
Thank you for my shameless plug opportunity. Again, it's Protect Your Peace Therapeutic Service. You can find my business page on Facebook and also on Instagram. And my husband, his company is Next Level Entertainment. He markets me like no other.
Yes, he does.
So if you didn't know me, you probably found me through him. So, I always have to shout out my sweetness at any time because I appreciate him. So again, that appreciation piece.
Well, thank you so much, Deidre, Dr. Wills. Thank you so much to our listeners. Y'all know we're going to do Food for the Soul at 12:30 over on the Soul Purpose Facebook page. So I think Deidre and Dr. Wills have agreed to join us over there. So y'all grab you a little glass of wine or whatever you want and meet us over there. So thank you so much, Deidre. This was phenomenal.
No, thank you for having me. Bless y'all. Love y'all so much.
Love you too.
Thanks, you too.
All right.
Have
Bye.
a blessed week, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, and our Facebook site is at Soul Purpose Show. This has been great. Next week, we talk about the body. We talk about your eating habits, the disease itself. We give you information. We give you good food for the soul. Please stay tuned to.
Thanks, y'all. See you later.
Everybody knows my name. We are gonna have some fun tonight. Running dimes on everyone. That night, wherever we go.
Boom, and we're off.
All right.
Okay.
You're welcome, Marquita. Thank you. I'm gonna let me turn this off.